In the Old Testament, there are three titans. Abraham is the father of the nation, Moses the founder of the nation, and David the leader of the nation. Under his rule, Israel hit its high point. Now, a couple lessons ago, we talked about Moses and this whole idea of recapitulation, how Moses is the type, and then Jesus is the greater fulfillment, the antitype. I want to do the same thing with David. As the leader of the nation at its high point, Jesus comes along and fulfills the hopes and dreams and promises of God. Now, it's only natural because David was such a popular king, and that was really the glory days of Israel. It's only natural that Jewish history would want to get back to the reign of David. So you see it all over the place in Jewish literature. You see it in the Psalms, certainly in the prophets. In the intertestamental period, you have the books of the Apocrypha. Those are some historical books. Some even value them as scripture and put them in their Bible as scripture. The pseudepigrapha, no one put it in the pages of the Bible, but they believed that it was valuable for devotional or maybe spiritual insight. And you see David recapitulated in those books as well. You see it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You see it in the Mishnah. You see the promises in the Talmud. 500 years after Christ, the Jewish people were still looking for David to return and rebuild the nation to its high point. So it's only natural that Christians would have done the same thing in the New Testament. And you see David everywhere. Paul's greatest epistle is Romans. And he begins the book of Romans by talking about Jesus as coming from the lineage of David. Revelation concludes the book, chapter 22, with the throw to David, Jesus' progenitor. So all throughout the New Testament, you know how long it takes them to get there? Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. This is the lineage of David through Abraham. Notice that though Abraham is genealogically before David, that David is actually mentioned first. Why? Because he's going to get priority through the whole book, as Jesus is the recapitulated King David. He is the antitype of the greatest king. And the genealogy itself, which some think is maybe a bit boring to read, just a list of names, it's not just a list of names. Listen, verse 17 describes how it is divided into three parts: Abraham to David, David to exile, exile to Christ. Each of those three sections has 14 names in it. In this particular rendition, you actually have to count David twice, giving him a double portion. It's very Jewish, but 14, 14, 14. Why does that matter? Well, if you're Jewish, you don't have a separate numbering system in the first century. So they taught their children to read and count at the same time. So what's the first thing a kid learns to read? His own name, of course. So as he's writing his name, his father would come along and say, now, this letter is this number, this letter is this number, so the numerical value of your name is, and he would count the letters. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, on it goes. Guess how you spell David? D-V-D. The Hebrew language only uses the consonants, so just these three letters, D-V-D. D was the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. 4, 4. You know what V is? It is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. 4 plus 6 plus 4, 14. Now, if you were a Jewish rabbi that did not believe in Jesus, you would pick up Matthew's document and go, I don't believe it, but that's very clever. Actually, I do believe it. Here's why. I see God orchestrating all of Jewish history in a numerically significant way to give us this message that the hopes you had for the high point of your life, I'm going to bring to fulfillment again in Jesus. Let me say that again. The numeric specificity of the genealogy is a reminder of the meticulous care that God takes, not just with Jewish history, but with your life and mine. And if you look in the rearview mirror and you count your days, if you number your hours, you will see the fingerprints of God all over them. The promise of David to come again and lead God's people is not just a historic reality, it's a personal reality that your hopes and your dreams rest in a good God who numbers your days.